Okay. Hopefully this is working and everything. All right. So hi guys. So this is gonna be like a first for me. Sort of doing this weird little like format thing. But basically, what I'm gonna be talking about today is I'm going to be talking about Star Wars action figures, Star Wars toys, and specifically I'm gonna be talking about Power of the Force 2, new Star Wars figures, and probably why it's not a good idea to invest in Star Wars figures. Um, Now, I don't think this is going to be news to a lot of people, but I just think that investing in Star Wars figures isn't a good investment, or at least It's not a good investment if you don't know exactly like what you're doing. So I think um, if you know what you're doing, then I think you're like in a good position. But if you don't know what you're doing, then I think you're in a kind of bad position. But I'll talk about that a little bit later. But we'll sort of get into this. So what am I talking about when I say Power of the Force figures and why you should not invest in Power of the Force figures? Well, I'm mainly talking about Power of the Force 2. So here we have Power of the Force 2. Now, Power of the Force 2 Star Wars action figures are probably one of the most abundant Star Wars action figures, one of the most abundant Star Wars products out there um, in the market today. And there's such an abundance of them that I personally believe that the demand for these figures doesn't. I mean, like, so the demand just isn't there to match the supply. So what I'm trying to say is that you have a huge supply of these figures, and I think you have a very low demand for these figures, just because people don't really want them. And the reason why people don't want them is because they are okay. So just a little bit of like contextual, I suppose, information about Star Wars figures. So there's two Power of the Forces. There's Power of the Force 1, and then there's Power of the Force 2. What we're looking at right now, this is Power of the Force 2. It's kind of like distinctive because you have the Starfader helmet right here. Um, let's take a closer look if we could get a better view of this figure right here. So this is just a random Star Wars Power of the Force figure. So here we have the Kenner logo. At this point in time, Kenner was bought out by Hasbro, so you no longer had. I mean, it wasn't really Kenner. I mean, these figures were being produced as under the name of Kenner, but really it was Hasbro who had bought out Kenner at the time and who were producing these figures. So, Power of the Force 2, you have the screen card back, and then you have an orange card back that I'll show here a little bit later, and you have the Starfader helmet. So this is Power of the Force 2. And typically you have different like little gimmicks here. You have some freeze frames. I think some came with like stickers. I'm not completely sure, but they all came with like their own little thing. But they released Hasbro released so many of these, and the reason why was because they hadn't been making a lot of Star Wars figures up to this point. Now, I can't really remember for the life of me when Power of the Force 2 was released, but Power of the Force 1 was originally released around 1985, and I believe it only had very few figures, maybe only 13 figures in total. And then they pretty much had a lull in terms of the production of Star Wars figures. I think they had some Ewok figures and they had some droid figures, and those figures are very rare and very difficult to find and track down, and they're very expensive as well. So it very much so the price very much so matches the rarity of those figures. And obviously, of course, condition and whether or not the figure is sealed is also going to play a factor in terms of how much money you might be willing to pay for a certain figure. But in any case, when we're talking about Power of the Force 2, this was the first time that they were really like mass producing these figures again since basically Star Wars Return of the Jedi, right? So they had all the old vintage figures, and this was really the first time that they were mass producing these figures. And so they produced so many of these figures. I mean, so many of these figures. It's crazy how many of these figures they produced. Now, I don't have any real numbers, but I mean, you could go anywhere, like pretty much any place that sells Star Wars figures secondhand, right? Like pretty much almost mini comic shops might have a few of these around. If you go to like some flea markets and stuff, you might find some of these just laying around. You go to just some collector's stores, they're gonna have some of these laying around. So I mean, just pretty much anywhere you go to, they're gonna have Power of the Force 2 figures laying around, and they were produced in such abundance. And I think what happened was is that you had one effect. I think was that you had a lot of people that were sort of into these figures and they wanted to buy them because they saw the success of the original Star Wars action figures, right? The real vintage Star Wars figures. They saw the success of those figures and they decided to say, okay, well, those figures became really successful because they appreciated over a period of time. And if we're getting these, then hopefully we could buy them, pick them up, keep them in card, right? And then they'll appreciate over time. And that just simply didn't happen. I mean, I think it's probably happened with a few figures, a few of the rarer figures, but it simply hasn't happened. And the reason why it hasn't happened is I think there's two reasons, and there's probably a little bit more to that. But I think one of the main reasons is that one, again, it's a supply and demand sort of issue, right? So we're talking about figures here where Hasbro mass produced these figures in such numbers and such quantities that, I mean, they were all over the place. Now, I wasn't alive when these figures were first released, but I mean, just by judging the numbers that we have today at some stores, I mean, these guys must have been like all over the place. They really must have been, and people must have been picking them up. But it's just like the demand was never there, right? I think in the long term. And also I think the second factor is that you had figures like these where it's just they don't stand up to modern action figures. I know that sounds a little bit ironic because I think if you look here at like some of the new Han Solo figures, like stuff, this is still 5 points of articulation here. You know what I mean? Like this isn't like the super articulated stuff that we were used to like 3 years ago maybe, right? This is 5 points of articulation. So while these are still 5 points of articulation, and the figures we're getting now are, for the most part, with the exception of the new vintage collection and the Black Series 6-inch line, we're still getting 5 points of articulation figures. And this is either a good or a bad thing. I mean, to me, I have my own opinion about it, and I'll probably talk about it in a later video, and I'll explain why I think 5 POA isn't great, but that's my own opinion. But I'll talk about that later. In any case, these figures don't stand up to modern figures, and I'm not just talking about articulation. I'm talking about just the size and the bulk and the shape of a lot of these characters. Let me see if I could. Here's a prime example. We'll just take this from Brian's Toys. Let's see if we could get a bigger image. No, unfortunately we can't. But I don't know if you guys can see this. Hopefully you guys can. We could probably Control Plus here a little bit more, just so you guys can get a better look at this. But if you guys can see here, look at this Luke Skywalker. I mean, this Luke Skywalker is completely buffed. You know what I mean? Like you wouldn't. No one. I don't understand anyone who would want to pick up this figure and, you know, take it out of the card and say, okay, well, I'm gonna go ahead and put it on display and it's gonna fit in with a lot of the modern figures we have today. No one would do that. You know what I mean? It just doesn't, because these figures just simply, they're a product almost of their time, right? I mean, this is very much so probably. It's just I don't know what they were going for here. I really don't. I mean, it's just they have these huge buffed up chests. They have these narrow waists, and their legs are in a very widespread position. I mean, it's just the figures don't stand up. Even though today we're still dealing with 5 points of articulation, and these are very much so 5 points of articulation. Actually, I think some of the newer ones, like the this trooper, this new stormtrooper, I think it has the Mimban stormtrooper has 7 points of articulation, because I believe the wrists are actually articulate, which is cool. But still, though, for the most part, though, we're still dealing with 5 points of articulation. So while the amount of articulation is the same, these figures simply aesthetically, they don't fit on the shelves. You can't take this figure out and really put it on a shelf and you know, just have it be a part of your display. I mean, there's some figures that you can, right? Like the Imperial Royal Guard from Power of the Force 2, you could certainly do that, right? Because it makes sense, I guess. I mean, I don't know if I could show you the Imperial Royal Guard. So, but yeah, I mean, it just makes sense for that to Power of the Force 2. It just sort of makes sense. Like here, look at the Imperial Royal Guard from Power of the Force 2. You know, I mean, it looks like this. I mean, this isn't that bad, right? I mean, for what it's worth, this is JediBusiness.com. This isn't, oh, you see it right there, but this isn't that bad, right? I mean, you could put this probably like on a modern display, and it won't look too terribly bad. And in fact, that's actually what I've done. I bought one of these guys, and I put it on display because haven't had a Royal Guard. Recently, I've remedied that problem. Check out my review on the new Royal Guard from the Black Series. That's just a little bit of a plug for myself. But you could fit this guy in a modern display. I would think. At least that's what I did. But this guy, this Luke Skywalker, you simply cannot. Now, if you want to put a bunch of Power of the Force 2 figures together, and put them in a display, then sure, they might work. But I just think that in this setting, they simply don't. And I think that's a little bit of an issue, I think, with these figures. Now the price is at $7. So clearly, I mean, I think we could probably, this might be around the same price of modern Star Wars figures. So clearly the price of some of these figures hasn't appreciated at all, actually, which is I don't know. I mean, I don't know if that could be good, that could be bad. Now some figures are quite expensive. Now this is Power of the Force 2, Biggs Dark Lighter. This is Biggs. He's quite expensive. I'm not too terribly sure why, to be honest. I don't know if he's rare or not. Oh well, he's graded. Never mind. He's a graded figure. But yeah, I mean, for the most part though, a lot of these figures here look $4. These are the stickers I was talking about, by the way. Just some of them came with like little stickers like that. But yeah, I mean, for the most part, they're just not really, you know, worth too terribly much. You know, they're just sort of there. And I think sometimes what happens is you go into some of these collector stores or some of these flea markets, and they'll try and sell you these figures for like they'll take this Luke Skywalker and they'll be like, oh, this is a Luke Skywalker, and you know, this is an older figure, and they'll try and sell it to you for, I don't know, maybe like $12, $15, $13, maybe in the higher end, maybe like 25 or something like that. Don't even pay that. Don't even pay that, because they're just simply not worth it. Power of the Force 2 figures aren't worth it. These figures are worth it right here. These are the original Power of the Force figures that came with the oh, here's another Luke Skywalker from the Power of the Force 2. But these are the original Power of the Force figures right here. If you visit the site eBay here, we see this is the original Power of the Force figure. This is a B-Wing pilot right here. So here's the B-Wing pilot. I believe this is a repackaging of the B-Wing pilot. I believe. I'm not too terribly sure, but anyway, here's the original Power of the Force card. So you see it says Star Wars Power of the Force Special Collector's Coin. They all came with collector's coins. All of them did. And so that's pretty cool. One of the more infamous figures that came from this line was certainly Yak Face. I'm not sure if we'll be able to find Yak Face. Oh, here he is. Here's Yak Face. $600 for this Yak Face. Ooh, great shape apparently and everything. $550 for this one. So yeah, I mean these are the ones, and this isn't even carded either. I mean, I don't even know if does this guy even include the coin or not. I'm not sure. I don't think he does. But yeah, so this is the Yak Face from way back when, and this figure is notoriously rare, to be completely honest. But yeah, so this is the original Yak Face. One of the most expensive Star Wars figures, I think, in my opinion, is this Yak Face, and it came from the Power of the Force line from 1985. So this was the original Power of the Force, and then up here is Power of the Force 2. So understand that when you're, you know, thinking about collecting Star Wars figures, and then don't buy Power of the Force 2 as an investment. Now, if you want to buy this Yak Face as an investment, go ahead, because I think, is it going to go up in price? That's a good question. I don't have the foresight to really see whether or not it's going to go up in price, to be completely honest with you, just because of the fact that I think it's it really just depends. I don't really know. I mean, I think we'll have to see whether or not this one actually sells. We'll have to see if it sells or not, and then we could just kind of go from there. Here's one for $230. This has gotten 36 bids, and it has, I think, about 1 day left, maybe. So we'll have to see. I mean, it really just depends on how much people are really willing to pay for some of these figures, especially this Yak Face. So yeah, that's something that you should take into consideration. I think even with modern figures now, I wouldn't even consider buying them as an investment. And I think maybe that's what some people did. Maybe I think I'm not really too terribly sure, but I think if there was anyone, maybe some people might have bought the Force Awakens figures when they came out and kept them in card, thinking that they're going to be an investment and they're going to be worth a lot of money over a period of time. And let's see, some of them are, some of them aren't. I mean, here's a Han Solo from the Force Awakens. It hasn't appreciated in value at all. I mean, I know, like here, look, there's people that are selling it for like $13, but I mean, to be honest, I wouldn't pay $13 for this. I don't think most people would, to be honest. So, I mean, I think some of them, I guess, have appreciated in value just a little bit. And it's kind of tough to say because, I mean, The Force Awakens was released like 3 years ago almost. Well, I mean, 2 years ago, really, in 2015, and we're in I don't know, April. So no, we're in May. So yesterday was May the 4th. So yeah, I mean, I don't know. We'll just have to wait and see how things go. Here's some Star Wars Black Series figures from the 6-inch line. Some of them are around $8, as you see here. Some of them are a little bit more expensive. Here's Poe Dameron. Here's a Darth Maul for 16. Here's what's really interesting. Here's a Star Wars Black Series Imperial AT-ST Walker. This is, I believe this was maybe like a Walmart exclusive or something. But I believe this was being sold for around $40, and it's here for around 25. So yeah, I mean, if you want to pick this up, I would. I might. I don't know if I'll pick this up. I kind of want to, but the $7 shipping and handling is it's quite the fee. So I'm not too terribly sure. But yeah, that's basically that. That's pretty much all I have to say. Just, you know, if someone tries to, I suppose, connive you into buying Power of the Force 2 action figures, or someone tries to make it seem like you're getting a really big deal, like, why is this, like, I don't understand why this card is being sold for this much. Like, I don't even know what's going on. But yeah, that's kind of insane. So yeah, I mean, just don't, guys, don't buy them as an investment. Buy them because you like them. But even then, I don't even know. So that's all I pretty much wanted to talk about today, is just, you know, Power of the Force 2 and why they're not necessarily too terribly good of an investment. Power of the Force 1, though, as I said, is probably pretty good. Really rare stuff right here, this yak face. Though I would certainly gravitate towards this. Bid on it now, guys, if you want to. It's got 1 day and 5 hours left. So that's pretty much it. A little bit later, I might make something about newer Star Wars toys and 5 points of articulation, but we'll see. So thanks for watching, guys. I really appreciate it, and see you guys later. Thanks. Bye.